Nobody remembered how it started anymore. Maybe it was a mining dispute, a careless insult during a peace summit, or just one unlucky shot fired from the wrong ship at the wrong time. The galaxy had been a simmering pot of tensions for years. Humanity had been the newcomers, fresh, curious, a little arrogant, but mostly harmless. At least, that's what the other species thought. They didn't know us. Not really. At first, it was supposed to be a small conflict, a quick war, maybe a few burned colonies, a treaty signed under duress. The usual politics of power. The bigger empires, the Kravlan Syndicate, the Trelzan Unity, the Vor Consortium, they laughed when humanity sent its first fleets into battle. Primitive, they said. Emotional, reckless, easy prey. The first battles were brutal but predictable. Human ships were torn apart by advanced alien weaponry, thousands died screaming in the coldness of space. Entire settlements were wiped out, their cities melted into glass by plasma bombs. Their leaders were paraded on enemy broadcasts as warnings. But humans, they didn't break. They adapted. Within months, new ships rolled off dry docks, tougher, uglier vessels built with the single-minded purpose of surviving hell. New weapons, reverse-engineered from captured tech, tore into enemy fleets like rabid wolves. And something darker happened too, something the galaxy wasn't ready for. The old codes of honor, obeyed by every other species, were shattered by humanity like brittle glass: no mercy, no surrender. Every battle ended with the same brutal message: if you cross us, we will erase you. Human soldiers became nightmares whispered in alien tongues. They were called Deathborn, Flesh Reapers, World Breakers. Small squads of humans dropped onto enemy worlds, leaving behind nothing but ash and broken monuments. They learned alien psychology, then used it against their enemies, turning fear into a weapon deadlier than any plasma rifle. There were no peace offerings, no ceasefires, no negotiations. Humanity didn't want forgiveness. They wanted fear, and they got it. Children across the galaxy cried at night, not from tales of monsters hiding under the bed, but of humans slipping through the cracks in the walls. But it wasn't enough. No, not yet. Humanity had lost too much to stop now. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore, they were fighting for something worse: revenge. In the burned-out ruins of New Saigon, under a sky still bleeding from orbital bombardments, General Elena Merrick stood before the shattered remains of her home world. Her skin was cut from shrapnel, her armor dented and bloody. When she addressed the scattered remnants of Earth's military, her voice was low and far colder than rage. "They thought we were soft," she said. "They thought we would kneel. They were wrong." The crowd, a battered legion of survivors, listened in silence. The wind carried the stench of death across the cratered ground. "We will not rebuild," Elena continued, eyes burning like twin stars. "We will not forgive. From this day forward, we are not the dreamers. We are not the lost children of a dying world. We are the nightmare. We are the extinction they begged for, and the galaxy will never forget what comes next." The campaign that followed was called many things by historians: the Great Purge, the Age of Fire, humanity's reckoning. But to those who lived it, it was simply terror in its purest form. Fleet by fleet, world by world, humanity moved through the stars like a storm that would never end. Their ships were no longer sleek or beautiful, they were brutal machines with sharp, jagged lines designed to inspire dread. Some even broadcast the screams of fallen enemies across enemy frequencies before each battle, a psychological warfare tactic that made even the bravest alien admirals hesitate. The Vor Consortium was the first major empire to fall. They had once called humanity a minor pest. That memory didn't save them. On the red sands of Vor Prime, survivors crawled from the ruins of their shining cities, only to be rounded up by human shock troops. No treaties were signed, no mercy was shown. The humans dismantled the Vor civilization piece by piece, stripping their libraries, burning their temples, and smashing their monuments into dust. They weren't just killing bodies anymore, they were erasing histories, cultures, memories. Across the galaxy, desperate cries for help echoed from every system under siege. The Kravlan Syndicate pleaded for an emergency alliance. The Trelzan Unity sent emissaries offering reparations and apologies. Old enemies who had fought for centuries now begged each other to stand together against the humans. But it was too late. Humanity didn't want peace. They didn't even want control. They wanted the galaxy to fear the night, to jump at shadows, to wake up sweating from nightmares where Earth's flag burned above their ruins. On the bridge of the dreadnought Remembrance, General Merrick's personal command ship, she wore no insignia anymore. Humanity had no need for symbols of rank. All that mattered was survival, vengeance, and dominance. A junior officer approached her, face pale even under the harsh light of the war room. "General," he said, voice trembling slightly. "We've received word from the Council of Eldery. They offer unconditional surrender and reparations. They're willing to give us 12 core worlds and access to their entire tech vault." Elena stared at him for a long, heavy moment. Her eyes were like the cold vacuum between stars, empty, merciless. "Burn them anyway," she said. The officer hesitated. "But, ma'am, they surrendered. They should have thought of that before they butchered our children." "No deals. No forgiveness," Elena replied, her voice flat. Within hours, the Eldery core worlds were turned into blackened husks. Their once beautiful biospheres were choked with ash and radiation. News of the massacre traveled faster than light, and with it, the legend of humanity's wrath grew. Entire star systems went dark. Their populations hid underground, trying to become invisible. Pirates, mercenaries, smugglers, all vanished like mist before the advancing human fleets. Even the savage Vardath, who prided themselves on bloodthirstiness, refused to engage human ships. It didn't matter. Humanity hunted them down anyway. It wasn't war anymore, it was extermination. And the galaxy finally understood, this wasn't about victory. It wasn't even about survival. It was about fear, pure, crushing fear. And humanity was winning. The third year of the war turned the galaxy into a graveyard. Where once stars had twinkled against velvet darkness, there were only fields of wreckage, silent hulks of destroyed ships, charred remains of orbital cities, and shattered satellites tumbling through the void. Humanity had become more than just a military force, they were myth. Every child born on an alien world grew up fearing the faceless, relentless monsters from the cradle of Earth. But it wasn't just soldiers anymore, it was everyone, farmers, doctors, teachers, scientists. Everyone had become part of the machine of war. Everyone had blood on their hands. No one was innocent. On the war front, Captain Marcus Vance led the 17th Infiltration Corps, one of the most feared units in existence. His orders were simple: make examples. Not just tactical victories, but psychological devastation. On a small jungle moon called Veyron 6, a Trelzan refugee colony hidden deep within misty forests, unarmed, starving civilians thought they were safe. They were wrong. Vance's team dropped from orbit in silence, their black armored forms blending into the shadows. The refugees didn't even know they were under attack until the first firestorm swallowed their shelters. Vance watched through his visor as mothers clutched their children and fled into the trees, only to be corralled by walls of flame and gunfire. His men didn't fire indiscriminately, they herded the survivors into clearings, ensuring there were witnesses to the horror. Trelzan culture valued honor above all else, they believed dying in battle was the only noble death. Vance knew this, so his orders were clear: don't give them battle, give them slaughter, give them shame. When the smoke cleared, the survivors stumbled away from the ruins, broken in both body and spirit. Messages were carved into smoldering trees in every human language, translated through alien symbols: we are your fate. Word spread quickly. The Trelzan unity crumbled from within, as suicides, mutinies, and desertions tore through their ranks faster than any human fleet could have. Back aboard the Remembrance, General Merrick stood in the war room, watching holographic star maps flicker. Red marked every fallen world, yellow marked the systems still resisting. There was no green left, there hadn't been for months. An advisor approached her, hesitant. "General," he said, "we've intelligence that several non-aligned systems are considering preemptive surrender. They're requesting guarantees of survival if they turn over their resources and leaders." Merrick made a slow, deliberate motion that made the younger officer step back instinctively. "Guarantees?" she echoed, voice dripping with scorn. "Where were their guarantees when Earth's colonies burned? When our children screamed into the void?" She leaned closer, voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "Tell them no deals. No treaties. They can run. They can hide. It doesn't matter. Humanity remembers." The advisor nodded quickly and fled, leaving Merrick alone with her maps, and her ghosts. Outside, in the cold blackness of space, humanity's fleets grew ever larger, fueled by salvaged alien technology and the iron will of a betrayed species. They didn't build monuments to their fallen, they didn't sing songs of heroism or victory. They built war machines. They forged nightmares in the outer rim systems. An old alien sage, blind and half-mad from decades of war, spoke to refugees, "You do not understand the humans. You think they fight for pride, or conquest, or even revenge. No, you fools. They fight because it is all they have left. Pain has consumed them, shaped them. They have become the storm itself. You cannot reason with a storm. You can only pray it does not see you." But the storm was already on its way. The Council of Nine Worlds, the last great alliance of alien species, prepared for their final stand aboard the Sanctum Eternum, a small moon-sized ship bristling with shields and cannons. In its vast shadowed chamber, the council argued in a dozen languages. "We outnumber them," shouted Var of the Rilnax Dominion. "We outgun them. Yet your worlds are ash. Their rage is a fire we cannot extinguish," croaked Madame Seleth of the Kryn Confederacy. "We feed it with every battle." "They fight like beasts," hissed High Minister Julivin. "Worse than beasts. They destroy not to conquer, but to erase." At the head of the table, Supreme Chancellor Viril of the Eldari Alliance lifted his hand for silence. His golden robes once symbolized wisdom and peace, now they hung heavy on his frail frame. "We have but one option left," he said, voice tired but steady. "We fight to the last. We show them that we will not die quietly." Across the chamber, heads nodded grimly. No words of hope were offered, no speeches of triumph, just acceptance. They sent their fleets to the edge of the Helios Rift, a strategic choke point, where they could force humanity to come to them. It was the largest gathering of ships in galactic history, millions of vessels, countless soldiers. From the blackness beyond the rift, the human armada emerged like a swarm of mechanical locusts, ships black as oil, bristling with weapons, advancing without formation, without ceremony. No battle cries. No demands. No warnings. Only the slow, inevitable march of death. On the bridge of the Remembrance, General Merrick stood motionless, hands clasped behind her back. Beside her, Captain Vance watched the enemy fleets align. "They're ready for us," he said quietly. "They think that matters," Merrick replied, her voice colder than the vacuum outside. She gestured toward the comms officer. "Broadcast." The officer nodded and opened a channel across every ship, station, and world tuned to the Helios Rift's frequencies. A single message echoed, not words, just one image, Earth burning. The humans didn't need to explain. The galaxy already knew why they fought. With a silent command, the human fleets opened fire, no tactics, no mercy, only overwhelming, relentless destruction. The Helios Rift lit up like a dying sun. Energy beams tore through capital ships like paper. Missile swarms blackened the skies. Human boarding pods slammed into enemy vessels, disgorging death squads that swept through corridors like phantoms. The Council's defenses crumbled within hours. Supreme Chancellor Viral watched in stunned silence as the battle collapsed around him. Ship after ship erupted in flame. Escape pods vaporized before reaching safety. He turned to his aides, voice breaking, was there ever any hope? No one answered. Captain Vance led the final charge aboard the dreadnought Savage Dawn. His soldiers moved without hesitation, without pity. He stepped over the bodies of council guards and aides, rifles spitting death in all directions. In the council chamber, he found Chancellor Viral kneeling among the ruins, still clutching the broken seal of his once great alliance. Vance raised his weapon. Viral didn't beg, he just whispered, "Why?" Vance hesitated for a single breath. Then he answered, voice like iron, "Because you made us monsters." The shot echoed through the shattered chamber. When it was over, the last hope of the galaxy lay dead in the ruins of the Sanctum Aeternum. Humanity moved on, leaving only silence in their wake. In the aftermath of the Helios Rift massacre, there was no more resistance, no fleets, no alliances, no treaties. Whispered in the darkness, what few scattered colonies remained hid themselves beneath oceans, inside mountains, or deep underground, hoping to be overlooked and forgotten. But humanity didn't forget. They hunted. Entire star systems were quarantined and burned. Planets showing signs of alien habitation were scoured from orbit. There were no speeches, no demands for tribute, no banners of conquest raised. Humanity wasn't interested in ruling, they wanted silence, absolute, permanent silence. Captain Marcus Vance, now promoted to general after the fall of the Council, led Operation Claim Sweep, a campaign to erase the last pockets of organized alien life. On board the assault carrier Black Mercy, he watched from the observation deck as firestorms consumed the lush jungles of Edris IV, once home to millions of peaceful Arvani. They had tried to surrender, even offered entire continents for mercy. It didn't matter. Vance didn't feel anger anymore. He didn't feel anything at all. The fires reflected in his deadened eyes, and all he could think was, they would have done the same to us if they could. The humans had convinced themselves of that long ago. It made the extermination easier. It made the nightmares quieter at night. On Earth itself, everything had changed beyond recognition. It was no longer the blue marble that poets once sang about. Massive shipyards floated in orbit like mechanical tumors. The surface had been stripped for resources, rebuilt into vast cities of black steel and concrete, bristling with gun emplacements and shield generators. There were no more parks, no more theaters, no more dreams of peace, only preparation for the next war, the next threat, real or imagined. Back on the Black Mercy, Vance walked through corridors lined with soldiers, each wearing the same dead stare, the same empty pride. They passed murals not of heroes or victories, but of fallen Earth colonies, craters where cities once stood, and monuments to betrayal. The humans didn't glorify what they had become, they didn't lie to themselves. They knew, and they accepted it. In one quiet corner, new recruits watched an old video loop, Earth as it once was, blue skies, green forests, laughter, music, things they would never see except on screens. A boy no older than 18 asked his sergeant, was it really like that? The veteran, scars down half his face, stared at the screen for a long time. When he finally answered, his voice was rough and low, it was, before they took it from us. For a moment, the boy's eyes flickered with something, grief, maybe longing, maybe hope. But it faded quickly, smothered by the same grim determination that filled all of humanity now. Hope was dangerous, hope could get you killed. Better to be the nightmare. Better to be the storm. Across the galaxy, systems continued to go dark, one after another, like candles snuffed out by a merciless wind. There were no more cries for help, no more desperate messages. Only silence. And humanity ruled that silence with an iron grip. The galaxy had never been quieter. Where once there had been bustling trade routes, flashing beacons of communication, and vibrant cities on 1,000 worlds, now there was only empty space and abandoned ruins. Humanity had won. They had crushed every enemy, silenced every voice, buried every history but their own. Yet victory tasted like ash. On board the Remembrance, General Elena Merrick sat alone in her private chamber, staring at a hologram flickering weakly above her desk. It was an old image, a sunrise spilling golden light over a field of wildflowers, a place that didn't exist anymore. Sometimes she wondered if it had ever been real at all, or if it was just a fantasy they'd invented to justify everything they had done. A knock came at her door. She didn't answer, but it opened anyway. Captain Vance entered, armor scuffed from the latest campaign, expression grim as always. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. Merrick didn't look up. "Another pocket of survivors?" "No," Vance said. "Something else." He activated a small device, and the hologram shifted. It showed a planet on the far edge of the Perseus Arm, unnamed, officially abandoned. No settlements, no known alien presence. Yet sensor logs showed life signs. Human life signs. Merrick's brows knitted together. "Explain." "They're defectors," Vance said finally. "Refugees from Earth. Dissidents. They abandoned the war effort years ago, went dark, and built their own colony out here. No military presence, just a real community. Farms, schools, peace." Merrick's mouth tightened into a hard line. "They're breeding weakness," Vance added, reading her mind. "If we let them survive, others might follow. They might start thinking there's another way besides strength." Merrick closed her eyes for a long moment, hearing the voices of her fallen comrades, the ones who died screaming in the early days, the children snuffed out by alien bombardments, the families torn apart by greed and betrayal. "We didn't sacrifice everything just to let it all rot," she whispered. Her hands clenched into fists. "Prepare the fleet," she said, voice like iron. "We wiped them out." Vance saluted sharply, but there was something else in his eyes this time, a flicker of doubt, regret. It didn't matter. Doubt had no place here. 2 days later, the Remembrance arrived in orbit over the rogue colony. The settlers had no ships, no weapons capable of piercing human shields. Their only defense was a pathetic old communication array broadcasting a simple message on all frequencies: "We are your brothers and sisters. We only seek peace." Merrick listened once, then ordered the bombardment. Kinetic strikes turned the sky red over the colony as forests ignited, rivers boiled dry, and buildings shattered like glass. In a control center deep within, civilians huddled together, terrified mothers shielding children, elders praying in dead languages, young faces pressed against cold stone floors, waiting for the end. Above them, once protectors now executioners delivered it without hesitation. When the smoke cleared and the last screams faded, there was nothing left but blackened earth and molten ruins. No songs, no memorials, no witnesses. Humanity had turned its own future into a graveyard. Deep inside the Remembrance, in the silence of her private chamber, General Elena Merrick sat before the flickering image of a long-dead Earth. For the first time in years, she wept, not for the enemy, not for the dead, but for the monstrous thing she and all of humanity had become. And for the terrible truth that there was no way back. The galaxy, once vibrant with countless cultures and histories, now drifted as little more than a collection of tombstones under cold stars. Humanity had wiped the board clean, no more alien empires, no more challengers, no more enemies. But victory had left them hollow. Without wars to fight, old divisions long buried under shared rage began to crack open again. On board the Remembrance, General Merrick convened her final council, a gathering of surviving military leaders who had guided humanity through its darkest hours. They met in the Grand Atrium, a room once filled with the banners of Earth's nations. Now, only black flags hung, stained with soot and ash. "We can rebuild," said Admiral Holt, pounding a gauntlet fist on the steel table. We have the knowledge, the tech. We can bring back civilization. Rebuild what? Snapped Commodore Tessa Vin. There's no one left to trade with, no culture left to integrate. We are alone. We will rot here unless we keep moving, keep fighting. Fighting who? Holt shot back, we killed them all. Another general muttered, then maybe we turn the guns on each other. Merrick sat silently at the head of the table, listening, measuring. They were soldiers, bred and broken by endless war. None remembered how to live without it. Neither did she. She rose slowly and the room fell silent. Enough, she said, voice low and final. There will be no rebuilding. Murmurs swept through the room. There's nothing left to rebuild, she continued. We have outlived our purpose. The galaxy doesn't need rulers, it needs ghosts, memories, warnings carved into the bones of history. Holt looked at her as if she'd gone mad. You want us to just disappear? I want humanity to remain what we have become, Merrick said, a nightmare, a legend, a force whispered about by those who dare rise from the ashes. Vance finally spoke. We keep the fleets moving, no home world, no empire, only stories, only fear. It was a mad plan, a suicidal plan, but somehow, in their broken hearts, the council knew it was the only one that made sense. They were not builders anymore, they were destroyers. And destroyers had no place in a peaceful galaxy. Slowly, grudgingly, they agreed. The new directive was simple, the fleets would divide into nomadic forces, traveling the dead lanes of space, visible only when they chose to be. If new civilizations rose from the ruins, if any dared to forget the horrors of war, humanity would return, not to rule, but to remind. The remembrance would become the first ghost fleet, slipping into deep space without a trace. As the council dispersed, preparing to carve humanity into drifting legends, Merrick stood alone at the viewport of her ship. Beyond the stars lay a silent future, one without wars, but also without hope. And she wondered, for the first time, if that silence might be worse than the storm. General Merrick stood at the viewport long after her council dispersed, the distant stars cold and indifferent. The remembrance glided through the void, engines humming with the faintest whisper, a lullaby for ghosts. In her mind, she replayed every battle, every fallen ship, every shattered world. She remembered the screams and the silence that followed, and she wondered if humanity's legacy would be pity or terror. 6 months passed, and the fleet splintered into nomadic warbands, each named after a long-forgotten word of warning in an extinct alien tongue. They drifted through sectors once bustling with trade, now empty corridors of memory. Supply convoys followed the ghost fleets at safe distance, tending to hull integrity and reactor coolants, maintenance without mission, survival without purpose. On a barren moon orbiting a dead star, a small group of refugees emerged from hiding to scavenge. They had grown up on whispered legends of the humans, stories told by parents trembling beneath rock overhangs. With caution, they approached the remains of a human frigate, its black hull half buried in crimson dust. Inside, they found a data core still alive, its last log fragment a simple phrase, "We are the storm. Remember us." They etched the words into stone, a warning to whoever might come after. Back aboard the Remembrance, Merrick convened a private meeting with Captain Vance and Admiral Holt. The three of them sat in the war room, holographic maps replaced by static star charts. No worlds glowed red or yellow, only centuries-old supernova remnants marked in pale gray. "We are becoming legend," Vance said quietly. "But what legend? Predator or protector? We never chose." Holt leaned forward, voice low. "We chose fear. And yet, there are those who cling to hope." He tapped a data pad. "I've intercepted transmissions from scattered human enclaves, dissenters, children of dissidents. They speak not of war, but of rebuilding homes, of art, of gardens under artificial skies." Merrick closed her eyes. "They risk everything to practice compassion. It disgusts me, yet, it gives me, something I cannot name." Vance watched her. Perhaps it's the last ember of what we were. In the deep rim, off-grid human colonies had multiplied, small settlements on lifeless rocks, hydroponic farms on gas giants' moons, digital enclaves in asteroid belts. They maintained oral histories of peace, blue oceans, green forests, laughter echoing in open fields. Young children, born generations after the war's height, learned these tales as myth, marveling at photographs of Earth, flowers swaying under a sky unsullied by ash clouds. Word of these colonies reached the ghost fleets, carried by smuggler networks and clandestine comm relays. Some fleets sought them out, not to destroy, but to witness. Veterans in faded uniforms, faces etched by grief, walked among the settlers. They saw fields of golden wheat beneath bioluminescent domes, heard music rising in communal halls, tasted bread baked by hands unaccustomed to violence. And for brief moments, they felt human again. General Merrick, haunted by memories too bitter to swallow, made a decision. She ordered the Remembrance to rendezvous with one of the largest off-grid settlements, New Aurora, perched beneath an artificial sky on an airless planetoid. The fleet assembled in silent formation, no weapons were discharged. As they entered orbit, Merrick addressed her commanders. "This is not a campaign," she said. "This is an observance. We will bear witness to what we destroyed, and to what we might become again." They landed near the settlement's edge. As Merrick stepped onto the dusty surface, she felt something foreign, uncertainty. Settlers gathered, wary but curious. Among them was a girl no older than 16, with bright eyes and soil-streaked cheeks. She approached Merrick and offered a small bloom, a violet flower hydroponically grown in nutrient-rich gel. "For you," the girl said. "They say you once led the storm. We want to show you the calm." Merrick took the flower, its petals trembling in her steel glove. She stared at it, breath catching in her throat. Around her, survivors gently laid fresh saplings in cratered ground, painting over scars with green life. Children ran laughter through the streets, and musicians strummed strings made from salvaged alloy. Wine was passed in simple clay cups. The taste was sweet, unfamiliar. Merrick closed her eyes as the flavor bloomed on her tongue, fruit grown for pleasure, not for ration. She realized she had forgotten how beauty felt. That night, beneath an artificial aurora dancing across the sky, Merrick walked to the edge of the settlement. Captain Vance joined her. The two of them stood in silence, watching color ripple through the stars. "Do you regret it?" Vance asked softly. "Everything we've done." Merrick exhaled slowly. "Regret is for the living. I don't know if I'm still alive." She held out the violet bloom, now wilting in the dry air. "But I see now that fear is not our only gift, that we can choose compassion, even after we've burned the world." Vance nodded. "Then perhaps our true legacy is not the nightmare we became, but the promise that even monsters can learn humility." Merrick dropped the flower into the dust. "Tell the ghost fleets, they may rest. We will return when needed, but not to destroy. We will stand as reminders, shadows cast by a past no one must repeat." In the years that followed, the ghost fleets dispersed, slipping into legend. Many never returned, choosing solitary courses among forgotten star lanes. Others became guardians, aiding fledgling worlds at risk of conquest by tyrants or plagues. Humanity transformed again, this time into something neither predator nor prey, but a memory alive on the edge of history. And somewhere, beyond the final frontier, ghosts whispered in the dark, telling tales of the day when the storm learned to shelter rather than scorch, of a species that lost its soul, then found it again in the quiet bloom of a violet flower beneath an artificial aurora. Decades passed, and the legend of the ghost fleets grew into myth. Across the spiral arms, whispered rumors told of silent black ships emerging from nowhere to shield a nascent world from annihilation, and then disappearing before thanks could be given. Mothers spoke of them as guardians, children painted them on cave walls, poets lingered on the idea of humanity's second birth as saviors rather than scourges. On Corelli's prime, a lush ocean world carved by rift rivers and floating archipelagos. Centuries of isolation had bred a fierce civil war. Two dynastic houses, once partners in trade and exploration, now fought over dwindling resources. Cities fractured into rival cantons, each drop of water, each grain of sand, became fuel for conflict. Captain Syra Kellen of the ghost frigate Mirage drifted on the edge of Corrales' atmosphere, monitoring distress beacons and emergency transponders. Her crew, veterans of the old war who had chosen self-imposed exile after New Aurora, watched the planet's turmoil with haunted eyes. "We have to intervene," Ensign Doric said, voice heavy. "They're on the brink of genocide." Kellen stared at the storm-racked surface. "Our directive," she replied, "is not to conquer. But we will not stand by while they destroy each other. We can show them mercy." Below, orbital batteries from both cantons trained their guns on each other, planetfall imminent. Kellen gave the order. The Mirage descended in silent glide, shields shimmering like a living veil. Cantonal alarm sirens wailed as the black hull eclipsed the sun. "Citizen soldiers of Corrales," Kellen's voice boomed from every comm channel, every city loudspeaker. "We are humanity's shadow, sent not to punish but to protect. Remove your weapons. Lay down your arms. Come together and listen." For a moment, the world held its breath. Then, across fields and archipelagos, soldiers hesitated. Cannons ground to a halt. Armor platoons set down rails of rifle, but war drums had fallen silent. Kellen and her landing party touched down on the coral-white sands of the central islet. They walked into the largest plaza, where representatives from both houses stood, swords at their sides, eyes locked in hate and exhaustion. "Look around you," Kellen said, gesturing to the blackened trenches and shattered statuary. "This is not survival. It is oblivion. You have the power for creation, water reclamation gardens, solar harvester stations, ocean farms. You once thrived together. Choose that future now." A hush followed. No one spoke. Then the youngest delegate, barely a man, knelt and laid his blade at Kellen's feet. "Teach us," he whispered. "Teach us to be better." In the weeks that followed, the Ghost Fleet encircled Corrales Prime, not as conquerors, but as protectors. Engineers lent by the humans repaired desalination plants. Hydroponic specialists taught villagers to coax rice from brackish swamps. Historians and archivists unearthed old treaties and shared them in open forums. Slowly, a fragile peace blossomed. Captain Kellen oversaw the first joint council of the two dynasties in a century. Under the watchful eyes of the Mirage's crew, leaders signed a new pact of unity, pledging mutual aid and shared governance. As ink dried on the crystalline panels, the human captain at last allowed herself a small smile. "This," she told her officers later, "is why we endure. To prove that even after the storm, dawn can come." Back on the Remembrance, now gray and scarred with time, General Merrick's hologram rotated slowly in her private sanctum. She was older, lines of age carved into her face, but her eyes still glowed with determination. News had arrived that Corrales Prime's peace held, and humanity's legend had shifted once more, not just ghosts of vengeance, but heralds of hope. Merrick reached out and touched the flickering image of her younger self, standing amid ruins after the war. "We did not lose our souls," she murmured. "We reclaimed them." A soft chime signaled a new message, an invitation from the newly united Corrales Council, asking the Remembrance to attend their first cultural festival, an expression of reconciliation through art, music, and communal feast. She rose from her chair, feeling the weight of centuries lift from her shoulders. "Prepare to jump to Corrales' orbit," she ordered her aide. "I will see what humanity can build when fear no longer guides its hand." As the human ship powered up its drives, Merrick allowed herself a single thought of quiet pride: the nightmare was over. The storm had passed, and in its wake, life began again.